This is Power Hour with Gabriella Power.
Hello and welcome to Power Hour. I'm Gabriella Power. Thank you for joining us. This week, President Donald Trump led chants with a group of new Marines in honour of Veterans Day.
And that's one big ooh-roll. New Marines, Mr. President, just ooh-rawed the hell out of you there for what you just said about
that's good. Well, we love them. They are a special group indeed.
Mr. President, have you ever done an ooh-raw to a bunch of Marines?
Not the kind that I just heard. I just heard a level of professionalism with the way they did it that I don't think anybody can match it, to be honest. That's very impressive.
Mr. President, why don't you drop one? Mr. President, why don't you drop an ooh-rah real quick?
I will. Hoorah! Hoorah!
Yes. Okay. We love everything about that.
Yes, we do love everything about that. The president later took part in a wreath-laying ceremony to commemorate Veterans Day and honour fallen service members. Now, as we know, Donald Trump gives more interviews and more time to the media than anyone else. And unlike Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, his interviews, they are guaranteed to be entertaining. Here he is on Fox News showing off the White House Presidential Walk of Fame.
This is the Presidential Walk of Fame.
Now, whose idea was this?
My idea. Everything's my idea.
Everything's your idea, okay.
Yeah, sadly.
Who's that guy?
That's Barack Hussein Obama.
Okay.
This is Biden right here.
Wait a second. The profile of Biden is
So he's the worst president in the history of our country, and Barack Hussein Obama is top 5, meaning bad.
Are you going to replace that with his actual photo?
No, I don't think so. Look at the faces on these people.
The auto pen, there is never a dull moment. And before we get into the show, let's start with media meltdowns. Starting with CNN's Abby Phillip, who sat down with fired MSNBC host Joy Reid to claim that Conservatives live in their own information bubble, suggesting that her job is to fight conspiracy theories.
Conservatives are living in a completely different information world than liberals. And breaking that down needs to be done. Because when you don't ever even hear the facts, it's hard to even know that you're wrong. And that happens a lot. I mean, half my job sometimes is knowing what the latest conspiracy is, so that if it comes up, I'm ready to address it. Because it happens a lot where people don't even know that what they're saying or what they've seen and believe is not true. And so that happens a lot, and I don't come away from that saying, what's the point of this? People are just saying false things. I think that one time that person brings up something that is debunked and false, and I debunk it at the table, might be the very first time that someone out there has heard an alternative point of view.
It is incredible that Abby said that with a straight face to Joy Reid, the woman who's compared Donald Trump to Hitler, who described Kamala Harris's election campaign as flawless, but actually peddled a very sick and deranged conspiracy theory that Trump's assassination attempt in Butler was staged.
We still don't know for sure whether Donald Trump was hit by a bullet, whether he was hit by glass fragments, whether he was hit by shrapnel. We don't have those details. We actually have no details from his physician, even though this man is still a Secret Service protected, and presidential candidate. We knew almost nothing.
Joining us now is Oli London, author and media personality. Oli, it's wonderful to see you again. We have some exciting personal news of yours to get into in a moment. But firstly, can I please get your reaction to CNN's Abby Phillip there speaking to Joy Reid? I mean, there's certainly a reason that CNN is losing its audience when you've got people like Abby just dismissing Conservatives, suggesting that, of course, she knows better than all of them. And Joy Reid, I mean, there's a reason she was sacked too from MSNBC, because she's absolutely terrible.
Yeah, it's very ironic that Abby Phillips chose to go on Joy Reid's podcast, and Joy Reid was axed from MSNBC amid dwindling views, amid her kind of outbursts on air and spreading kind of untruths. So interesting that Abby Phillips would then discuss conservatives peddling conspiracy theories and saying that they don't understand facts when, Abby Phillips, her own show is one of the few CNN shows that does actually have conservative commentators on, like Scott Jennings, who does a phenomenal job fact-checking her guests who, tend to get a little bit angry on air and, he just comes with the facts. So it's kind of ironic that she would say that considering she does have conservative guests on her show. And, Joy Reid is somebody that I think that just seems to be angry all the time. And she spouts these conspiracy theories like President Trump's assassination attempt at Butler, Pennsylvania, and, other things as well in terms of Black Lives Matter advocacy. And, she's not a credible source. Many people look at her almost as a joke. She was actually on MSNBC. She wasn't doing a good job there. President Trump has called her out before. Any conservatives have called her out. So I think, Abby Phillips is someone that is a journalist that does work with conservative commentators, should know better that, people like Scott Jennings on her show always comes armed with the facts, and he always, kind of fact checks the liberals on her show.
And that's what makes it worth watching, really, is when Scott Jennings brings out the receipts and you see the lefties just go into meltdown during those panel segments. But Oli, let's talk about your journey with faith, because 3 years ago you became a Christian and you were just recently baptised in the Jordan River. Can you talk to us about that experience, what that experience was like for you?
Yeah, so 3 years ago, I started discovering faith and became Christian, decided to give myself to God and try and turn my life around. I was going through an identity crisis back then. So finding faith helped me get through that. And just been on the 3rd anniversary to the River Jordan in the Sea of Galilee in Israel to get baptized on the 3rd anniversary. And it was an incredibly special thing. I visited some of the holy sites in Israel where Jesus had the Last Supper. I walked down the Mount of Olives where, Jesus famously walked on Palm Sunday, and visited the Church of the Holy Sepulchre where Jesus was believed to have been crucified. And such a surreal experience. So to get baptized in the very waters where John the Baptist actually baptized Jesus himself and their disciples was a truly, truly special thing. And, I think Israel is a place where, a lot of people don't realize this. There are so many people living in harmony. There's 2 million Muslim Arab Israeli citizens that live in harmony. That's 20% of the population. You have the Druze community, you have the Christian community, which is growing in Israel, and of course the Jewish community. So it's a place that is very important to so many different faiths. And for anyone that's, Christian or another faith, going to Israel is a very special experience because you get to visit all these places that were mentioned in the Bible. I went to Magdalena, where Mary Magdalene was born, saw the home of her location where she was born, and visited the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and actually prayed on the site where Jesus was crucified. And it's a very, very powerful experience. So I really do, encourage Christians to go on a pilgrimage to Israel to support the people there. They've had a hard time with the economy the past 2 years, and tourism is a very big industry there. So I think it's very important for people to go and do a pilgrimage and to discover yourself as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I went to Israel last year and it was absolutely life-changing. I want to get your thoughts on what we often hear from Hollywood celebrities. I mean, often there's a lot of Trump derangement syndrome when we hear from woke Hollywood lefties, and a lot of political opinions, many using social media or if they're accepting an award to promote a message such as Free Palestine. Yet many celebrities seem to be silent about what's happening in Sudan and Nigeria with Christians being slaughtered, Oli.
Yeah, I mean, when Trump actually brokered the Gaza peace deal, you had pretty much crickets and silence from Hollywood celebrities and TDS sufferers like Rosie O'Donnell, Cynthia Nixon, all these people that are obsessed with talking about Trump. Suddenly they're silent when he actually brokers the deal to get the hostages out. So that kind of speaks volumes. And then the fact that there's no Hollywood celebrities speaking up about what's going on in Sudan, what's going on in Nigeria, with the only exception being Nicki Minaj, who has been very outspoken about this. President Trump actually praised her on Truth Social. And, you know, she has received a lot of praise from Christians for speaking up for those in Nigeria. But she's also received backlash from the kind of liberals that are, you know, the TDS sufferers. But President Trump is the only person has actually said that he is considering taking action in Nigeria to fix this. He's warned the Nigerian government to take action against persecution, the burning of churches, the slaughtering of Christians. So it does speak volumes when you have people like Rosie O'Donnell, who literally devotes her life. She fled the US, and all day, every day, she's making 10-minute TikToks bashing Trump. Yet she's silent on the fact that he was able to broker the ceasefire deal. She doesn't give him credit. And she's silent on, of course, what's going on in Sudan, what's going on in Nigeria. And like I said, Nicki Minaj is pretty much the only celebrity that's actually spoken up.
That's right, and credit to Nicki Minaj, but as you say, one of the only celebrities that's actually speaking out about this. Look, Oli, before I let you go, I want to talk to you about the issue of women's safety, which seems to be still a fight in America, a fight here in Australia. American singer Tish Hyman has been in the headlines after confronting a biological man who repeatedly entered a women's locker room at her LA gym, and the singer then raised this with a California state senator at a town hall meeting. And just look at how this conversation went.
Senator Winner, as the only black lesbian here, can I please ask you a question, because I flew here to do that? Yeah. Okay. As a lesbian woman who was attacked in a woman's locker room at Gold's Gym this week by a self-identifying trans woman with a documented history of domestic violence, I'm deeply concerned about women's safety in female-only spaces. What would you say to women who are seeking assurance that their safety will be protected from men who, by California law, can self-ID as women in women-only spaces, sir? Please tell me.
Yeah, so we want, everyone to be safe, and we also know that, we have trans people, both men and women, who are men and women.
I mean, the conversation continues, but it's just so backwards. I mean, it's a serious issue when it comes to women's safety. Women are being let down.
Yeah, I mean, this brave woman, Tish Hyman, was at a Gold's Gym in Beverly Hills, and she was horrified when she was undressing in the locker room, and this biological male that identifies as a woman walked in. And she actually confronted him, and she was clearly very upset in the video. And, they had an altercation, and, she has been very outspoken about this. The transgender male actually went on TMZ Live and said he has a right to go in the women's locker room because he's felt this way for his whole life. But, it's wrong. And Senator Scott Wiener has been behind pushing very radical left LGBTQI laws in the California State Senate that are very much anti-women. So he's, the last person that's going to really listen to what she's saying and help. But good on her for speaking up and trying to get this message across, because, it does take guts for a woman to speak up, especially with the backlash from trans activists and the targeting from them. So, good on her for speaking up.
100%. Oli London, author and media personality, thank you so much for joining us on Power Hour and speaking to us about your experience in Israel. We really appreciate it.
Real pleasure. Thank you.
Let's bring in our panel now, and joining us is Josh Hammer, Senior Editor-at-Large at Newsweek, and Alex Tarasio, Signal Principal and pollster. Thank you both so much for joining us. Let's start with, I suppose, the biggest story of the day, the Epstein scandal. The Democrats have released emails that allege that Jeffrey Epstein mentioned Donald Trump multiple times in his email correspondence with Ghislaine Maxwell, and there are suggestions that Trump, quote, knew about the girls. Now, these documents do not suggest any wrongdoing on the part of the US president, and the president has blasted the Democrats on Truth Social. He wrote, "The Democrats are trying to bring up the Jeffrey Epstein hoax again because they'll do anything at all to deflect on how badly they've done on the shutdown and so many other subjects. Only a very bad or stupid Republican would fall into that trap. The Democrats cost our country $1.5 trillion with their recent antics of viciously closing our country, while at the same time putting many at risk. And they should pay a fair price. There should be no deflections to Epstein. or anything else, and any Republicans involved should be focused only on opening up our country and fixing the massive damage caused by the Democrats. Here is Caroline Levitt.
These emails prove absolutely nothing other than the fact that President Trump did nothing wrong. And what President Trump has always said is that he was from Palm Beach, and so was Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein was a member at Mar-a-Lago until President Trump kicked him out because Jeffrey Epstein was a pedophile and he was a creep. This is truly a manufactured hoax by the Democrat Party, and it is not a coincidence that the Democrats leaked these emails to the fake news this morning ahead of Republicans reopening the government. This is another distraction campaign.
Alex, let's start with you. What's your assessment of this development? How damaging would you say this is for the president?
Well, I think that the Epstein story is really hard to ignore. It's this story that doesn't seem to go away. And so the fact that it's come out now when it did makes some sense to me. And I think the president's explanation of why this is out now, I basically accept. As far as what this means for him, what this means in public opinion, the president's real priority needs to be on the economy. I think that he knows that. I think that that's come after the election results last week. We've seen that in our own polling that's going to come out tomorrow, that voters have really soured on the direction of the country right now. For the first time, we see results of people saying that America's best days are behind it. And that's really driven by pessimism in the economy. This is in the same poll where we see people giving Trump a lot of credit for what he's done with the border. Even Democrats, 70% of voters give him at least some credit for closing the border. That was a problem that people thought basically impossible to solve. And there's also been a lot of visibility on peace deals, but it's come at a time when the economy is getting worse, when costs are continuing to go up, and when people just have a little less money in their pockets. And so I think that's the focus. And whether Trump is focusing on other positive things like peace or other negative things like Epstein, I think anything that takes away his focus on the economy is going to hurt him.
Josh, what's your assessment? I think that the Trump administration handled the release of the Epstein files terribly, but at the same time, I mean, there's a lot of focus on the Democrats that they were pretty silent about the Epstein files while Joe Biden was in power. It's only now that Donald Trump is president that there's a big song and dance about it. What do you make of this development?
Gabrielle, I think that everything Alex said is exactly right. I would endorse essentially every word of what my co-panelists just said. Look, I was very critical of some of my fellow conservative talkers and commentators back in July, when many of them were calling for Donald Trump's head over the way that the administration definitely did, to an extent, botch the rollout. I'm not going to pretend, Gabrielle, to your point, that the Attorney General Pam Bondi and Kash Patel, there were a lot of legitimate questions to be asked there. But the point that I've been making all along, both back in July and now today, now that this saga that will never go away apparently is back in the news, the very basic point I made is that the American people, I genuinely don't think there are that many people that really go to sleep at night and wake up in the morning thinking a lot about this. This probably ranks somewhere between the 40th and 50th most important issue, if that, facing the American people. To Alex's point, there were just elections in New York City, New Jersey, and Virginia last week. And based on every single exit poll we see, there was a recent Harvard poll that just came out there on kind of accumulating the exit polls. And we see that it's affordability, it's inflation, it is stagnant wages, it is still stubbornly high inflation. It is just the cost of living mini crisis in general. That is what people care about. And every day that the president is not fighting on that terrain, I think, is at this point a day that is wasted. And I don't think that he should fall into the trap. I think his Truth Social post was correct to punch back at it. And if he can galvanize his allies both on Capitol Hill and in the media class to really kind of push that point, then I think that then puts Democrats in a very bad position of trying to focus on an issue that is of such obscure origins and is frankly just not of that much interest other than kind of the salacious New York Post page 6 readers to the American people. So if he can stick to the issues, I think he's in good shape here.
Let's talk about the government shutdown that's finally coming to an end. And here's Ana Navarro on CNN making some pretty wild claims about the Democrats and then getting fact-checked by Scott Jennings. Look at this.
I know a lot of Republicans. I know a lot of Democrats. They're cut from different cloths. Democrats simply don't have the cold-heartedness necessary to see people suffering and just say, let them eat cake.
Yeah, but then
they are not the types that
they voted repeatedly to do it. I mean, you just heard Democrats
And what
on
was
our
Donald
air.
Trump doing in the meantime?
He doesn't have a vote in the legislature.
No, he's the president of the United States, the most powerful president with Republicans in my lifetime, Scott. He never once even told them, come back to Washington.
We just played Democrat.
You guys have been out of Washington for a month and a half.
Correct.
A month and a half.
We just played Democrat after Democrat admit that the Democratic plan to prolong the shutdown was causing, quote, suffering. That was their words, not mine. Democrats themselves realized the tactic of suffering was no longer something they could personally stomach. That was their party, not Republicans.
Alex, how damaging is this for the Democrats when they clearly prolonged the shutdown? I mean, they could have ended it weeks ago.
I would be so frustrated as a Democrat this week because they came off of an excellent week, maybe one of the best weeks for the Democratic Party in ages, with the aftermath of the elections. They had the wind at their back, and then the manner in which this shutdown ended just completely arrested it. And the past 36 hours have been awful for Democrats. I don't think, to Anna Navarro's point, any American cares if Mike Johnson kept the House of Representatives out of session. That is inside baseball. Nobody cares outside of Washington, D.C. Nobody cares in Washington. But the shutdown did hurt both parties. And I think this is a rare news cycle this past maybe week and a half where nobody looked good. I don't think the Democratic Party looks good having prolonged the shutdown. I don't think that the Republican Party had a great week and a half either. And at this point, I think the bases of both parties are pretty upset, particularly the young people in each party that don't know what this was all for.
Josh, what's your assessment of it all?
Well, I think that Democrats unequivocally lost the shutdown. I'm not entirely sure that Republicans won. There's not necessarily a tremendous conservative policy victory here. On the contrary, the fact that there are all these federal workers who Russ Vought, the director of the White House Office of Management Budget, he's been in charge of the triage operation, trying to temporarily furlough or indeed outright fire federal workers. The fact that Republicans agreed to essentially hire all these fire workers back and give them back pay. Well, you know, as someone who thinks that there's probably one, two, or three too many deep state bureaucrats in Washington, I would have liked to have seen a lot of these guys just go get a nice job in the private sector and not mooch off of the taxpayer. So I'm not necessarily thrilled about that. But the Democrats unequivocally lost this. To Alex's point there, they shut down the federal government for the longest time in United States history, 43 days and counting, unless it ends right now, which it looks like it probably is. But this was a long shutdown. And what did they gain? Like, literally, what can they say about it? They can claim absolutely positively nothing. They allegedly, ostensibly were fighting for these expiring Obamacare subsidies. By the way, they did a really lousy job of messaging that. I think most people were deeply confused as to why exactly the government was shut down. They didn't have a clear and compelling reason or rationale. It was spiking healthcare subsidies in primarily blue state, Democrat-run states, so it was self-serving and cynical at that. Essentially, Chuck Schumer, my read on this is that Chuck Schumer really shut down the government for 43 days and counting because he was trying to ward off an Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez primary challenge in his upcoming U.S. Senate re-election. The irony of ironies here is that he looks so stupid for caving without having gotten anything whatsoever, is that if anything, he now probably looks worse in the very eyes of those New York State Senate primary voters than he did before all this. So no one gained anything whatsoever, but hey, at least the flights will be back on time, God willing, before our Thanksgiving holiday here in just 2 weeks.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Look, it's been just over a year since Donald Trump won the election, and looking at what Donald Trump has been able to achieve in that incredibly short time since January 20, it's been phenomenal. I mean, it cannot be overstated how much he's been able to achieve around the world, peace deal after peace deal, and he's done an incredible job. But as you both kind of alluded to, it seems as though he may have dropped his focus when it comes to the economy, because that is what Americans certainly care about. A poll last week found that 77% of Americans feel anxious about their financial situation. I mean, that is not a great statistic. So that's according to this new Mind Over Money survey by Capital One and the Decision Lab. Now, Trump was pressed on the economy during an interview with Fox News.
And if you remember, when I first came in, the first 2 days I had a news conference, eggs, they were hitting me with eggs. Eggs had quadrupled in price. And they're screaming at me. I just got here. I didn't know about eggs. And Brooke Rollins, our agricultural commissioner, secretary, did a great job. And now eggs are what they were. We got eggs down. We get it all down. But our prices are much lower. Their line is price is affordability. That's the new word, affordability. It's much less expensive under Trump. And I haven't been here long. 9 months is not a long time. But look at what I've done to energy. Look at the price of gasoline. Going from $4.50 to $2.50 or $2.70, it's going to be $2 gasoline.
People want affordable.
Well, the economy is my thing, and we have the greatest economy in history.
Are Republicans not selling it enough?
Yes, the Republicans don't talk about it.
So they need to do a better job on Capitol Hill
The Democrats.
Josh, I want to get your thoughts on this because we just saw Zohran Mamdani become mayor in New York City, running on a campaign promising to make life more affordable. And now you've got Donald Trump being kind of grilled on the economy there in that interview. And I'm not sure about his answer, if it's really convincing, if Americans are really feeling the pinch. 70% of them say they're really worried about their financial situation. I think, does Donald Trump need to do more work here?
So there are some kernels of truth definitely in what President Trump just said to Laurie and Graham. For instance, energy prices definitely have gone down, and inflation overall right now, which is hovering around 3% at the moment, it's certainly in a better place than it was at for large swaths of the Biden administration, where it reached a high of 9.1% back in the summer of 2022, just over 3 years ago. So there are definitely some kernels of truth, but unfortunately in that answer, Gabrielle, if I'm being very candid here, and I say this as a conservative, as someone who has known President Trump multiple times, he's sounding a little bit like Joe Biden, actually, to be honest with you, where he's basically saying that my economy is great. The American people just don't see it. It's kind of this attitude that the American people aren't appreciating what we're doing there. That's not a good look for a politician in general when you start to say that the voters just don't appreciate necessarily what I'm doing. A better tactic, a more tried and true tactic, is to actually listen to the American people and to try to meet them where they are. So that CNBC poll that you showed there, 77%. Feel some sort of financial anxiety. I saw a separate poll just a week or two ago that currently 67%, give or take, roughly 2/3 of Americans currently live paycheck to paycheck, something that the business class, the laptop class just frankly doesn't even think about there. These are real concerns. And frankly, yeah, inflation is overall lower, but it's still 3%. That's still at least 1% higher than the Federal Reserve says it should be. And there's all sorts of data to indicate that younger millennials and Gen Z folks here in America in particular are achieving all these major all these major lifetime milestones at an older age when it comes to first-time home ownership, things like that. So they're big home ownership decisions. They're big. All these economic decisions are all delayed. So there's real reason to be concerned. So overall, I do think that the president ignores that to his peril.
Yeah, and that is so important for young people. You know, they want to be able to at least believe and have goals to buy a home, to have a family. It's so important. And Alex, you know, so many people do vote with their wallets. Are you concerned looking at those polling numbers?
Yeah, I am. And if I were in the White House, I'd be concerned as well. I know that they are, and that they are pivoting to this issue of affordability. And we had a poll result about, are you going to spend more money or less in the upcoming Thanksgiving holiday? And the number of people said less was 30%, more was 23%. And to me, that's a pretty decent story of what the economy looks like right now. There's some people that are doing pretty well. It's a minority. It's not that many. Most people are doing a little bit worse or treading water and just fine. That's not a great place for the economy to be. It feels tepid to people. And so Trump does have good victories to point to in his administration. He's accomplished a lot. That is unequivocally true.
Absolutely.
Done that on the border. He's done that on peace deals. But you don't necessarily get a reward from the voters for the victories that you've achieved. You just get another assignment. And so the voters ultimately care more about how they're feeling in their pocketbook and their bank account than world peace, even though that is unequivocally important. That is objectively relevant. It matters, but does it matter to Americans? I don't think that people necessarily know that.
Well, while we're speaking about the economy, plenty of people, you know, struggling at the moment. Jasmine Crockett, it's been revealed, has spent nearly $75,000 on luxury hotels, transportation and security this year in cities across the United States. Documents show that her campaign spending totaled more than $25,000 since January on hotels and limousine services. And here she is complaining about the cost of security.
I think that it's really a good question as to why a member of Congress needs to pay for security out of money that they go and raise, instead of focusing on making sure that they use that money to educate voters about why it is that their candidacy matters. I do think that it does people like me a disservice when you are so outspoken. And then what happens is, instead of you being able to put all your dollars into campaigning, instead, you've got to do things like pay for your security. But I kind of value my life, so it is what it is.
Josh, I mean, she's upset about spending money for security after repeatedly calling to defund the police. She's certainly not the only one that has to pay for security either.
Yeah, I mean, the hypocrisy is just utterly galling, is not? I mean, here is a woman who has become a very high-profile member of the House Democratic Caucus. By the way, Gabrielle, I'm still waiting for Jasmine Crockett to try to kick out Ayanna Pressley to be the Ringo Starr of the squad. I mean, you don't really hear a whole lot about Pressley these days. You hear a lot about AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashid Tlaib. I think that Jasmine Crockett is trying to make a play there to be the final member of the squad. She clearly has higher aspirations than her current backbencher house perch. But I mean, to complain, to cavil about using your private money on your security, how about all the Americans who can't afford that? I mean, talking here about what, 99.9999999% of Americans who can't afford private security. But oh, by the way, it's actually worse than that, because as you said, Jasmine Crockett wants to defund the police, the #1 easiest, most reliable way in American history of actually having security. Oh, wait, you don't want to have police? How about at least your right to actually protect your home, aka the Second Amendment? Oh, wait, she opposes that too. So she opposes the police. She opposes your ability to actually buy and lawfully secure and train with a firearm to defend your family, your home, and all that. But meanwhile, she has the chutzpah to say that her own private security detail has to come from her own campaign funds. I mean, the gross entitlement and privilege, to use one of the American left's favorite buzzwords, is just utterly astonishing there. And it's one of the many reasons why I think Jasmine Crockett, I cynically, as someone who wishes the Democratic Party nothing but the worst, I kind of hope that they actually elevate her more and more, because she's just so crazy and she says just the darndest things that will only redound against their interests in the mid to long term.
Alex, as a polling guy, I want your thoughts on what her kind of messaging would do for her, and what would happen if she gets kind of promoted throughout the Democrat Party.
I totally agree with Josh. I hope very much that Jasmine Crockett goes onto the campaign trail, whether she runs for Senate in Texas or just re-election in her own seat, and she talks to Texas voters about the terribly unfair high cost of her security. I think that will just get a lot of sympathy. I think that every family has their grocery bill, they have their diaper bill, and they have their security bill. And so she should talk about that. I think the voters want to hear about that more than anything else.
Mm-hmm. Look, finally, let's just finish with what's happening in the UK, because British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has been forced to address reports that rivals within the Labour Party are conspiring to replace him as leader just 2 weeks before the government budget is announced, which of course could further worsen his already abysmal popularity. Now, several British media outlets have quoted Starmer's allies as saying his position could be in imminent danger. Alex, looking at the polls and looking at Keir Starmer's popularity, it has absolutely plummeted in a really short period of time since July 2024. A YouGov poll said that this month only 17% of people in the UK actually approve of Starmer's performance, just 17%, while 73% disapprove. Also, Nigel Farage's Reform UK party, it just keeps leading in the national polls. What do you make of the reports that Keir Starmer has now been forced to address those reports that there are others conspiring to replace him as leader?
It's hard to think of a worse position that you could be in politically than Keir Starmer right now, and with one of the biggest majorities of any leader in the world. It's pretty incredible. And so I'm surprised that he's lasted this long. I think that there was no world in which he lasted until the next election. I think that was true many, many months ago, if not longer. If they're going to lose, and it looks very much like that will happen, the election's far away. They might as well do something with that majority between now and then. And so if I were a Labour member, then I would want to replace him and come in and at least accomplish something with that agenda. I don't know who's going to replace him, though. And I worry that the person will be quite a bit worse. It's hard to imagine how it could be worse than Keir Starmer, but got some good ones in that Labour Party.
Josh, it's pretty amazing looking at what Donald Trump has been able to do in America compared to Keir Starmer. I mean, since Trump came in, he closed the border, essentially, and he's been deporting millions of illegals. And you look at what's happening in the UK, and they're still in such a bad position with their immigration crisis.
The UK is a total disaster right now. It's an utter shambles. It brings me no pleasure to say that, Gabrielle. I am something of an Anglophile. I lived briefly in the UK. I am a profound admirer of all that the English people have brought to the world when it comes to the common law, when it comes to separation of powers, when it comes to political liberty and justice, more defined than a modern context. They've given especially the Anglophone world. They've given us all so much. So it's just horrific to see the country in this shape. I have friends in London who I talk to. There's one friend of mine who I talk to on a fairly regular basis. He is on the precipice of leaving because it has just gotten so utterly unbearable at this time in London. The silver lining, Gabriella, as you alluded to, is that it looks like if an election were held tomorrow, that Nigel Farage could actually become the next prime minister of the UK. I had the pleasure of seeing Nigel speak in Washington just a couple of months ago. We used to run Nigel Farage's op-eds regularly in Newsweek. I used to edit his op-eds, so I've been familiar with his work for many years now. In my opinion, he's one of the great unsung conservative heroes, not just in modern British history, but in all of modern European history. He was essentially the guy behind Brexit. What he was able to accomplish there is phenomenal. The fact that he is now having this comeback from his cable news broadcast days to be the new face of the British right is an amazing, amazing story. So if this story has any happy ending whatsoever for the UK, and I really, really hope it does, because again, I'm genuinely an Anglophile, it's not going to come via Keir Starmer. It's not going to come via the Labour Party. It's not going to come via the Tories either, by the way. They have a lot of their own problems as well. It's probably going to have to come from Nigel Farage. So let's see what happens. I'm certainly praying for it.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Josh Hammer, Senior Editor at Large at Newsweek, and Alex Tarasio, Signal Principal and Pollster. Thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Joining us now is Riley Sullivan, a reporter here at skynews.com.au, and he's always across the latest headlines from the royal family. Riley, it is great to see you, but it is a sad day for us here at Power Hour because this is our last cross together. You are such a talent, and I'm so grateful to have had you on this program for more than a year now, bringing all the royal news, bringing us right up to speed with everything that's happening around the globe. And we are going to miss you so much, but we are so excited for you taking on this next chapter in China, and I'm excited to watch you shine over there.
Oh, thank you so much, Gab. And it's been a pleasure to be a very, very small part of an amazing show. And I'm so proud to be part of the Power Hour extended family.
Riley, it's been such a gift to have you on this program, and we are going to miss you so, so much. But let's get into the royal news for today. Let's start with Meghan Markle. There are calls now for her to apologise after choosing not to wear a poppy on her label ahead of her Remembrance Day. Now, of course, bring us up to speed on what Meghan's excuse was for not wearing a poppy.
Yeah, so this was one that really raised some eyebrows, I think, across the Commonwealth. Of course, celebrations earlier this week for Remembrance Day. It's a huge part of the tradition of the royal family. They wear the poppy in the weeks leading up. I think it's an initiative that's been in place now really since the end of the First World War, where the royal family honours the sacrifices of servicemen and women, which I think is really important.
Of course.
You know, because when people maybe who aren't in the Commonwealth see headlines about, you know, people slamming Meghan for not wearing a poppy, they're probably thinking, oh, come on, this is such a beat up. But really, I mean, it's a symbol of respect.
Absolutely.
And it's a huge part of the tradition. She didn't wear the poppy, as we know, especially when she was out recently at Kris Jenner's birthday party. The optics of that, of her at this sort of celebrity bash with Harry, who was wearing a poppy, I will add. You know, meanwhile, the real kind of working royals are there marking Remembrance Day. We had Princess Anne here in Australia. We had Princess Catherine leading celebrations in the UK. And her excuse was basically that they don't have poppies in the US, that she couldn't buy one. And I thought that was a very weak excuse. I mean, firstly, she's worn a poppy in previous years when they've been in Montecito, so I don't think it's an issue of her finding a poppy. You can also order one. She's a multi-millionaire. She had, you know, ample time to order a poppy. Of course, a lot of the poppies are sold to raise money as well for veterans. That's also an aspect of it. But I think that, you know, reflecting on it, her attitude towards this, I think, really reflects her kind of position now. You know, if she doesn't want to take part in the commemorations and the traditions of the royal family and not wear the poppy, I can respect that. You know, she put something up on social media saying thank you to the veterans. She wants to do that, that's fine. But give us back the Duchess of Sussex title.
Absolutely.
You know, she wants to have the associations of the royal family and she wants to profit off that, you know, with her brand and all of her marketing things that have Duchess of Sussex, but she doesn't want to do the work. And this is the issue. It's a life of service. Royalty is not just a title that you can use to sell jam. it's a service, and if she doesn't want to do the service, give back the title.
Well said. You know, I just think it's absolutely appalling and outrageous every time I see that title out on her website as she's promoting jams, candles, whatever it is, and then not wearing the poppy and having a terrible excuse. I think it's very disrespectful. Now, the Duke of Edinburgh is officially set to visit Ghana just months after reports that Meghan and Harry were planning a tour of the African nation. So talk to us, is Edward's visit, is this a sign that the palace is potentially trying to hit back at the Sussexes?
Yeah, I think this is very timely, a visit by Prince Edward. He's visited Ghana before. The previous time was in 2018. I think that the timing of it suggests that I think the royal family is being proactive. We know that King Charles was very unhappy last year when Harry and Meghan went to Nigeria and Colombia. They were not there on behalf of the royal family. They weren't there on behalf of the British Home Office. They were there, you know, as private citizens. But of course, you know, they never let that get in the way of wanting to look like royals and having this fake royal tour. And we know that the king was upset about that because there is an anxiety about whether they are trying to undermine the monarchy in the Commonwealth, especially in Africa. You know, we know that the Nigeria visit was an optics success for the Sussexes, and therefore I think that was why Ghana, supposedly, the officials from Ghana did extend an invite to Harry and Meghan in February this year, and there were rumours that they were in the planning stages. So I think the fact that Prince Edward is now going to Ghana is a sign that, you know, forget about the Sussexes, this is the real royal family, you know, this is the real thing. So I think it's a sign that they are being more proactive, whether it's a lot of actions that have happened recently, whether it was, you know, removing Prince Andrew's title. The royal family, I think, is taking on a bit more of an active role of shoring up their position and really getting back to the work.
Now, disturbing new details have emerged about Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, of course, formerly known as Prince Andrew, and of course, Sarah Ferguson's bizarre final days in the Royal Lodge. Can you talk to us about how the Duke and Duchess of York, or former Duke and Duchess of York, I should say.
Takes a minute to get used to that.
It does, doesn't it? How are they coping with this new reality?
Yeah, you know, the reports about Fergie and Andrew's sort of days in Royal Lodge, we know that they're on the way out. They will be expected to leave the property in the coming months. At the moment, it's a financial arrangement. We know that the royal family is negotiating with Andrew about some kind of financial settlement because, of course, he did have that binding lease agreement that was able to kind of keep him there for so long. Now that that's off the table, he will be expected to leave. In the meantime, we know that Andrew and Fergie are still in the house, and some of the details, you know, it's a little bit Greek tragedy. It's almost a little bit like a Tennessee Williams character, especially when it comes to Fergie. We're hearing reports that she's taking it hard. I think that her identity was tied up in being Duchess of York. She had that title since her wedding day, and the loss of it allegedly was just devastated her. She supposedly has been relying heavily on the staff at Royal Lodge. There's also supposedly this kind of private bar area set up on the property called the Doghouse, of all things. And apparently that's where she's hanging out. She's really hitting the bar, and she's expecting the staff to kind of commiserate with her. And you know, I'm sure there is a level of sympathy. I think this has been a tough time for her, but I think at the end of the day, the reason that she's in this predicament and the reason that Andrew's in this predicament is because of their actions and their associations with Epstein. And like the royal family really kind of emphasised in that most recent statement, it's all about really the victims of Epstein. It's not about Andrew and Fergie. You know, I think we can all kind of have a level of sympathy that maybe that they're going through a lot of change, but that's nothing compared to what the victims of Epstein have went through. And really, they're getting their comeuppance.
Yeah. Now, Princess Beatrice has continued her charity work as a royal patron despite her parents' scandals. Is this a sign that Beatrice is still in the inner circle?
Yeah, you know, I think that Beatrice is probably taking a page from her grandmother, the Queen's book, which is to never explain, never complain. She has not spoken out about all of the turmoil that's been going on within her family with her parents. And instead, I think she's doing the right thing. She's holding her head up high and she's continuing to do charity work. She is a patron, a royal patron for about a dozen organisations. In recent days, we saw her step up for Outward Bound, which is a charity that was associated previously with her father, of all people. It's now a patronage held by Prince Edward, and Beatrice is going to be the new co-patron. So I think that that's a sign that you know, the royal family is still happy to put her to work. But I think she's handling this well. I think that Beatrice and her sister Eugenie are in an invidious position where, you know, if they complain, I think that there would be no sympathy. But I think if they, you know, if they kind of get on with it, there's also a risk of criticism. So I think she's really putting the charity work front and centre, and I think that this will be the test of their future, you know, perhaps when William becomes king.
Absolutely. Now, finally, the trial over the tragic death of a grandmother who was hit by the Duchess of Edinburgh's royal motorcade is currently underway in London. What's the latest update from the case?
Yeah, so this case is going on this week at the Old Bailey in London. Basically, it's a wrongful death case because sadly in 2023, the royal motorcade was transporting the Duchess of Edinburgh. And I'm not sure if people have seen a royal motorcade before, but it's kind of a bit of a convoy, and it has motorcycles who kind of flank the motorcade. And it was one of the motorcyclists who hit a woman named Helen Holland, and sadly she passed away. She was a woman in her 80s. And she passed away in hospital because she was hit when she was crossing the pedestrian crossing. You know, naturally with a royal motorcade, the idea being that they can move through traffic without incident and without, I guess, disrupting traffic. And I think that this case is really going to hinge on whether the motorcyclist involved was taking, you know, I guess the appropriate steps to ensure that it was safe before they're passing through. And it's a tragic case. You know, I think it's such a unfortunate circumstance, of course, for her family, and also for the Duchess of Edinburgh. She sent out a statement at the time expressing her condolences, and it's wrapping up this week, so it'll be interesting to see the outcome of this. Okay, thank you for bringing us up to speed on all the royal news, and thank you so much for your generous and huge contribution to this show. The show would not be the same without you. I don't know what we're going to do without you. I'm still coming to terms with it, but you are such a huge talent, a brilliant journalist, and I'm really excited for you. Thanks so much, Gab.
And that is Power Hour. Thank you for your company. We'll see you next week. Make sure you subscribe to Sky News Australia on YouTube.